All right, everybody. We are welcoming once again Chris Tackett, and we all know him from See It, Name It, Fight It, where he uncovers campaign finance and the Christian nationalist influence. Today, we're going to talk about the redistricting efforts here in Texas. So, first of all, welcome, Chris.
Well, thank you for having me again, Gwen. It's always fun to have a conversation.
It is. It is. Well, it's always fun to have a conversation with smart people, and well, you definitely fit that bill. So,
Thanks.
thanks. So, for those who may not know your background, what motivated you to get into this? Going from being a school board trustee, studying this, and then now doing what you do to shed light on what's really happening. Just tell us about the journey.
The journey. Wow.
Ooh,
I
amazing
was a
journey.
school board trustee in Granbury, Texas from 2014 to 2017. And prior to that, I was just a parent who was running through life, taking care, raising kids, blinders on to most things dealing with politics. And serving in a nonpartisan race or nonpartisan seat, which I very quickly learned was no longer considered nonpartisan by lots of folks. I started to see what was going on and understood the mechanics in Austin and what was trying to basically smear the names of public schools and across the state. And it was really being led by a gentleman named Tim Dunn and another named Ferris Wilkes, who were big players in my local House reps space. And at the time, I knew none of this, right? It was just a guy who was serving in Austin who didn't want to vote for public schools, even though he told us he would. And I pulled all of his campaign finance contributions, put them on a pie chart, and wowza, 70% of his money was coming from particularly Ferris Wilkes was the biggest piece of it. And we're talking hundreds of thousands of dollars for Texas House seats. So I knew that's why the guy was voting the way he was, because obviously these people were doing their things. And as I continued to dig, figured out there was a whole web of money. I shared it on Facebook, Twitter, any place that would, put it out there. And people around the state saw what was happening in my district and said, well, that feels like what's happening in my district too. Can you make me more pie charts? So I started, that's how I really started digging into the campaign finance to really understand the web of money and billionaires in the Texas. And then once you figured out what was happening, you had to get to why. And that's where my wife, Mindy, really started trying to dig into, okay, what's driving these billionaires? What are the things going that they're pushing for? What does it connect back to? And that was really Christian nationalism. And we figured out that North Texas was a hub for a lot of the movers and shakers, not just in the Texas scene, but nationally trying to influence our politics. So that's when we started talking about that as well.
Right.
And kind of moved into See It, Name It, Fight It as the kind of the website. We'll call it an organization. It's really just Mindy and I. But this idea that to understand and be effective in pushing back on things, you have to see what's happening, right? It's really taking those blinders off. It's
Right.
being able to name it. And what's driving a lot of it is Christian nationalism. Then you're ready to fight it. Now you're going in with open eyes. You know exactly what you're up against. Now you can actually put the strategies together and do something about it. So that's what we've been working on. And at this point, it's crazy that we've been talking about some of this for nearly a decade. So we've been deep.
Deep into it. Bringing it back to how it affects every aspect of legislation in Texas, and that's where redistricting comes in. Look, we live in Tarrant County, and we got a not so great dose of this back in June with our county commissioner's court and our county judge Tim O'Hare, who called for redistricting mid-census when it was already determined that it was the maps warfare. Now, thanks to the Justice Department and Donald Trump, Abbott has called this special session, and the priority now, of course, is flood mitigation, but also, you know, we know that redistricting is in there, and it seems to be taking a priority as far as getting hearings. What do you think is motivating redistricting now?
It's all about margins in the U.S. House. I
Right.
mean, that is the only reason we're talking about redistricting right now.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, if we look at what the first, 6 months of the Trump administration has been,
Mm-hmm.
most of the votes in the House have been razor thin, right? The margins
Right.
Republicans hold, they're it's a handful of votes, right, on any
Right.
given thing that's come up, and we have voted very much along party lines. When you look at the handful of things that have actually passed the House, they've been very close. Historically, in mid-cycle elections, or the halfway through 2 years, um, the party in power loses seats, and
Mm-hmm.
lots of things that the administration has done have been very unpopular. So it
Right.
just raises the possibility of seats flipping, right? And if Republicans lose control of the US House, just like in 2018, when
Right.
the same sort of thing happened, they lose the ability to just steamroll policy through,
Mm-hmm.
right? Because right now they hold the White House, the Senate, and the U.S. House, all three of those. So if there's something they want to push, they control all the levers of power. As
Right.
if the House flips back to the Democrats and Hakeem Jeffries becomes the speaker, all of those things that they've been just steamrolling, they stop. To
Right.
at least for them to do them legally, right? To
Mm-hmm.
follow the levers and follow democracy. So I think the Republicans are looking at this, they understand they have to gain seats wherever they can. And when you talk about gaining seats, you have to go to big states because that's where the most seats are. And you have to go to red states to pull that off. Big red states. There's no bigger
Texas
red
is as big as red.
than Texas, right?
Yeah.
And you've got to also then have a governor, Senate, and House inside the state who are willing to do your bidding. Because the
Right.
idea of trying to do redistricting in all of these different states where you might be able to pick up a seat here, a seat there, the juice isn't really worth the squeeze, right? When
Mm-hmm.
you're talking about Texas, this is it. So it is nothing but a raw power grab
Right.
to say we're going to force this through in a special session. We are going to leverage the DOJ and this Galveston court case from 2021, where they racially gerrymandered Galveston County, and the county spent about $4 million defending its maps. The decision there was that coalition districts was what they're called, where it's you have a your county might be, or your precinct might have a minority makes up the majority, right? So it's your black, brown, Asian communities, right? But there's no one group that is 50% inside that population set, that ethnic group. And so historically, the Voting Rights Act has said majority minority districts that are
Mm-hmm.
coalition qualify under the VRA, and you have to make sure you're not discriminating against those populations when you draw lines. This Galveston case that got all the way to the Fifth Circuit said, yeah, no, coalition districts don't count anymore. And that's what Tim O'Hare and Matt Krause were
Used.
relying on in Tarrant County, because the reality is most of Texas is incredibly diverse. We don't
Mm-hmm.
have just one community set that makes up a
Right.
majority. And so when the DOJ released their letter to Greg Abbott, literally the day before he called the special session
Right.
incorporating redistricting, it said they were targeting 4 districts in Texas. 3 were in the Harris County area, 1 in Dallas-Fort Worth, and said, oh, because these were flagged as coalition districts leveraging the Voting Rights Act, these are now unconstitutional as defined by the Fifth Circuit. So therefore, you have to redraw the lines to bring them back. It's nonsense, right? It ignores all precedent that we've had in all other court cases, everything else that the VRA has leveraged. But this is what they're leaning on and why they're saying it's these districts. And if you're redrawing those districts, well, why not move a few more lines around? And I mean, Trump has talked about 5 seats is the goal.
Right. So they're just pushing it.
They're pushing as far as they can. Again, they're scared to death they're going to lose their margin.
So I just keep thinking, right? It is. It's like illegal, but somehow they get away with it, and we don't have the courts to protect us like we would if this went all the way to the Supreme Court, which they also control. This is going to be tough.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, and honestly, I think part of where at this point, the folks who were leveraging the lawsuit against Galveston County have not appealed to try and go to the Supreme Court. Oh, okay. It hasn't, right? It could still take that step. But if you do that, and the Supreme Court says broadly that coalition districts aren't covered under the Voting Rights Act, it now impacts everywhere, right? Not just the Fifth Circuit and the places that are there. It has now been made the overall law of the land. And so there are times where people will choose not to take things to the next step because they're concerned with where the courts are and what might happen, that it impacts the whole country and not just individual areas that they rely on, their court circuits. So, what they're trying to claim is, hey, this is a legal thing, even though everything we know says, hey, it's totally in violation of precedent and intent of the Voting Rights Act. But if they go through and do it, it's going to get challenged in court, right? I mean, the people of Texas will see this new maps just like they did when we redistricted in 2020 or in 2021 after the 2020 census.
Right.
Those maps went to the courts, right?
And it still hasn't been rectified.
Exactly. It's still happening. So these ones, which are being done in a mid-census, just like Tarrant County, where you don't really know, are there new numbers they're trying to leverage? There's nothing truly official, right? Because the U.S. Census is the mark that makes it official.
Right.
That they're going to go through and do this. And if we challenge it in court, we would have to have it to stop it before an election. We would have to have a court put in an injunction. We've seen in Texas, they have not done the injunctions. So the maps stand. So now we're working with the hill that we might have been seeing as a challenge already becomes that much more of a challenge. But I also think there's opportunity inside that. Because to draw these lines, they have to take spaces to take a district that was blue, right? That voted majority Democrat. Right. They have to take red people from other places and draw them into these maps, right? So that you have to pull all of these folks in, which makes those places that were really deep red a lot less red, and pull them back closer to where they're a competitive race. And when they redrew all the lines in 2021, they basically said, we want no competitive races in Texas, right? So everything was, hey, 10 points for the Democrats and all of these, and it's plus 10 for the Republicans and all of these. And those are simple numbers. It was much more complicated than that, right? But that's what they did. They made them deeper blue and deeper red. Doing this pulls all of these seats back into more competitive spaces. And the way they're drawing the lines are based on historic turnout numbers, right? The way we normally see things go.
Which is how Tarrant County did it as well.
Exactly. But this is the space where, when you're talking about these primary races in Harris County and around, and Tarrant and Dallas counties, and again, the broader metroplex, those are the places where we see the most blue voters, but we see some of the lowest turnout
Right.
across the state. So if doing this activates a lot of people, if doing this gets candidates really fired up and they are connecting with young, diverse, and urban, and those are three different buckets that can overlap, but
Right.
absolutely drive, that's how you turn this entire thing on its head.
Right.
And instead of them stealing 5 seats, we start to take seats on the other side,
Right.
completely turning things around. And that's the path, honestly, to turning Texas blue.
It makes sense. I mean, because when you explain it as if we keep fighting through the courts and it goes up, that's going to set a dangerous precedent. But
Exactly.
it's still not fair. I mean, you should fight an unfair map, but in the end, it will have consequences for the entire nation. So, oh wow, wow, that's yeah, I did not think of that. So, okay, not the kind of thought I want though. So, let's
At
talk
least we're
Christian.
smiling.
Oh well, if you don't smile, you'll just cry, and we don't want to do that. So, let's talk Christian nationalism. What is that influence? Because that is a big influence into what's happening now. I mean, you've got your legislators who follow this path, who make sure and bow to the Tim Dunn types or those following that Christian nationalist agenda. So, what? Tell us about that influence.
Yeah. Well, and again, just so everybody who's listening who may want a definition of what Christian nationalism is, I'll give you my kind of working definition. It's this idea that the U.S. was founded as a Christian nation, that our laws and government was established to privilege
Mm-hmm.
a version of Christianity. Um, it's more political than it is about faith. It's really about power and imposing that version of faith, right, onto others. It is not to say that all Christians are Christian nationalists, but it's
Right.
not to say that those who buy into this Christian nationalism ideology aren't Christians, because a lot of them are,
Yeah.
and are very faithful, but they bought into this idea of power, right? And that their version of things is the only way that this country should function, and in their mind, it's what we have been the whole time, um, at least in the background, right? And so when we talk about what's going on now, there's the engine really behind inside Christian nationalism is something called Seven Mountains Dominionism. And it's this idea that there are seven mountains or seven pillars of our society and culture, that if they can gain control of those mountains, they take the nation. And the crazy part of is they think it triggers end times. And that's, this biblical Christ returning to the earth. But one of those mountains is government, right? And it's government at every level. It's school boards, it's city councils, it's county commissioners, it's the governor, the state house, and it is absolutely the federal government. And
Right.
so when we start digging into that, this idea that you have to gain control of the government, because government is how you can pass the laws, how you can stack the courts to ensure this ideology that you're pushing is forced upon everybody, whether they want it or not. And in most cases, it's all about privileging straight, white, Christian men in positions of power at all levels. It's not to say you won't have folks of other, skin complexions, other of religions that may not leverage proximity to power and
Right.
kind of, bend the knee, as it were. But that's the engine behind all of this. And honestly, this ideology has taken over the Republican Party, from top to bottom. I mean, the Speaker of the House in the federal government, Mike Johnson, is absolutely this Seven Mountains Dominionist type individual who buys into the ideology. Folks like our president isn't somebody who buys into all of this. I think he's really more of an egoist. But what he's done is he's enabled the people all around him who do buy into the ideology. I mean, most of Project 2025, which was written by the Heritage Foundation and all the other orgs, it's completely influenced by Christian nationalism. So the things we've seen happen over the first 6 months of the presidency, they're all coming from that playbook. And this redistricting and doing everything you can to claim levers of power and hold power, it's all connected.
So let's talk about the lawmakers who have to bend the knee at this moment in time. Can you give me an example of a lawmaker who might have been what we would call, say, a moderate Republican, and who has gradually changed over time and has focused?
Sure.
All right, let's do it.
Well, I think, look, one of the easiest ones for me is a guy from right here in Fort Worth, Charlie Geren, right? He was one of those guys who was so anti-Wilkes and Dunn, right? Has gotten into big fights with Beau French, who had run against him a few times, who's now the Tarrant GOP chair, but was completely and is still backed by Wilkes, Dunn, and Christian nationalism. Charlie was one of those folks who was anti-voucher, and vouchers are connected to Christian nationalism too. Anti-voucher all the way through, right? Was, I'm all about public schools, all about it. In this legislative session, voted right with almost all the rest of the Republicans and voted for vouchers this time, even though he said he didn't really want to, right? Still went along and voted for it. And you can look at bill after bill in the legislative session this last go round, all bills that were influenced by Christian nationalism, and the number of Republicans who voted against those priority bills, it was a handful at best on any of them. But Geren is one of those I looked at who always felt like was kind of that rational Republican, I'll call it. And even he has bent the knee. And I think that, the public school and the vouchers is the easiest illustration of that.
Right.
And there were I think 2 Republicans who voted against vouchers.
Was Phelan one, I believe?
Yep,
oddly enough, the former.
And Gary Van Dever. And Van Dever isn't running again. And Dade, who knows, may or may not. But all the rest of them voted for the vouchers.
Right.
And it is absolutely all connected.
Yeah. Well, they have a history. The folks behind it have a history of making sure that they do vote with them on every agenda, because if they do not, they become targeted and get primaried. And
absolutely. Millions of dollars pushed against them. Now, at the same time, and I'll pick on Charlie just a little bit here. In the 88th legislative session, we just finished the 89th. In the 88th, there were multiple Democrats who proposed amendments to control campaign finance contributions, putting reasonable limits, because in Texas, if you want to write $1 million check, you can write $1 million check. And these guys do. Amendments were put forth to control that, right? To cap it at $5,000, even $10,000, that's all an individual could contribute to a thing. And Charlie Geren was carrying the bill that they were trying to amend. And he was like, no, because, then we don't know, that restricts our ability to raise money to go fight these people. So the reality is when you talk about following the money and understanding what's going where and who's doing it, we have a tendency to say, yeah, their money is bad, but I like the money coming here. I want those big checks. And that's exactly what Charlie Garen did. And then it starts to, I mean, literally in this last primary season, the 2024 elections,
Right.
all these Republicans who were more rational, weren't bought into the broader ideology, were against vouchers, if nothing else.
Right.
They
Yeah.
all lost. Every
Yeah.
single one of them, almost. I mean, there was only a handful
Van
who
Dever
survived
was
the
the only
primaries.
one who didn't. Yeah. Van Dever
Right.
was the only one that
And now he's
survived
leaving.
this.
Right. He's leaving. So
He's like,
it is one of
near death.
those,
Yeah.
if we want to really control the influence billionaires have on our elections, we have to actually put meaningful things in place. And as long as those who currently hold power, I don't think we'll ever see that kind of meaningful change in the state.
Right. And that's all the more reason that everyday Texans, in order to really feel represented, have to look at these donors that are on this list, because that, if knowledge is power, and thank goodness you have see it, name it, find it, so they can find it rather easily.
That's right.
So how can we, everyday Texans, count on lawmakers right now to help defend democracy? Can we do it?
Well, I think in a lot of instances, it is showing up and making noise, right? I mean, there are these redistricting hearings going on all over the state,
Right.
in various locations. The Senate is doing all of theirs virtually, which is really to hide from voters, right? You don't go out in the public to do this because you don't really want to hear from folks. The House is doing some of these where they are doing it, where their committee is going to various places. And I recommend people, if you have the ability, show up and take your 2 minutes and light them up and tell them this isn't okay. And if you've got the chance to submit public comments on these things, do it. But I think the big thing that we have to understand is those of us who are engaged regularly and paying attention, we're going to show up and vote, and we're going to do things to push back against it. But when I talk about how do we trip this, redistricting, this gerrymandering up, it's turnout. And it's not going to be turnout of the people who are already voting. We aren't going to get a bunch of people flipping parties, right, who will vote the other way. We've got to be able to cut through the clutter and connect with folks who were just like me a decade ago, who weren't paying attention, to say, oh, this matters. And, both parties aren't trying to do the same thing. And I need to show up to make sure my voice is heard. So in this moment where we're pushing back on redistricting, look, you got to post about it on your social media. If you show up and testify, man, go find it and grab that footage of you talking about stuff and post it, right? Help other people see why you're so passionate about it so that they can get engaged and maybe help others see it. Because we only beat this by getting more people involved. And, whether it's working as volunteering to become a precinct chair and connecting with the voters in your space, in your community, whether it's showing up at meetings like this, whether it's, look, just writing to your House member, your Senate member, and telling them, look, I'm not down with this.
Right.
It's using your voice in whatever manner you can and trying to make others listen too. It may not be the lawmakers this time, right? Because odds are they've got this in the bank, but we should make it very painful for them all the way through. And that's what makes other people pay attention.
Right. I think that says a lot. Like when your friend sees that you either you pulled the recording of you making public testimony, or you do a copy of your public comments that you submitted online, or even a letter to the editor.
Absolutely.
All of these things, or have them, show what you're doing to make sure and drive turnout. in your area. Yeah, people need to see that their friends and neighbors are doing their part, and it does. It helps them, first of all, understand that, yeah, something is going on that's important and you need to be involved, but also, hey, it's a party. We're all doing it. So join us.
Absolutely. Well, and again, the reality is when we're talking about, turnout in the 2024 election, I
Mhm,
mean, we had almost 800,000 Texans not vote.
mhm.
We need those numbers
Yeah.
showing up. And as soon as we do that, we beat gerrymandering, we flip a state, we do all kinds of
Mhm.
crazy things that nobody thought were possible.
Right.
That's the goal.
Right. And I think also encourage your elected officials who are on the side of democracy to, hey, you've got to help get that vote out as well, even though they may be in a blue area or something that might be not a low turnout area. But that
Well,
vote.
the reality is those safest seats,
Hmm.
blue seats, are the ones
Hmm.
that see the lowest turnout. So we
Right.
do have to have, that's a great point, Gwen, have those representatives, make sure they're working like it's a
Hmm.
competitive district, making
Right.
sure they are turning their voters out. And it's not just connecting with your voters when it's time for the election.
Right.
It's
Be
doing that
there.
work all the time so that they
Yes.
understand why it matters.
Yeah, it is important because you've seen all of these town halls, and there are a lot of constituents showing up, and this is not an election year, but they're showing up and making sure that their voices are heard. So yes, be there for them. And people have really appreciated when the elected official who should be holding the town hall isn't, but
Mhm.
then somebody else, even another elected official in another area
Right?
shows up. So yeah.
Somebody's there to listen.
Hmm. That's what folks need. They need their leaders to listen to them and
Absolutely.
do right. So yeah. So tell us more about See It, Name It, Fight It, where folks can find your information. Just whatever you need to, because we need to make sure that people can get connected to the data that you submit.
Yeah. Well, I think the easiest place for folks to, jump in is see it, name it, fight it.com. All is kind of one big long word.
Hmm.
From there, we've actually got links onto my Texas campaign finance dashboard with
Hmm.
all the pie charts, your hearts. You can search them to your heart's content. I've got data loaded in. I rip the Tex Ledge or the Texas Ethics Commission database every
Hmm.
time they do an update. So I just ripped all the way through the semi-July reports.
Okay.
So those are there, and I've got the entire database going back to 2000. So it's every single person who's run for office, every single political action committee. You can see it. You just change the dates and who you want to find, and it's there. Um,
Hmm.
so that's accessible there. The other thing is I write lots of words on things, and so I've got a Substack that Mindy and I write things on occasion. There's a link to that Substack from there to where again all the things we've been putting out in kind of that longer form
Hmm.
are available. You can also find me on Instagram. I'm on TikTok, YouTube Reels, whatever. Any of
All the
the
things.
I'm still on Twitter. It will always be Twitter. Um, just because I think there are folks out there who need to see a different message.
Hmm.
Never gonna pay for the check mark or anything like that. But it is making sure the message and what we're trying to do is getting out there. So
Right.
you can just search for Chris Tackett on any of the social media platforms. You'll probably be able to find me. But see it, name it, fight it.com is the best place to jump in. And if you're really interested in the Christian nationalism elements that I talked about,
Mhm.
we've got links to the books, the articles, the things that taught Mindy and I kind of
Mhm.
how to talk about this and what it means are all there as well. So if that's a rabbit hole you want to dive into and really understand, the things that taught us are all accessible there as well.
See, it's a handy reference for everything.
There you
I
go.
will say one of the things that I found about your website, See It, Name It, Fight It, when you go into campaign finance, and one thing that I would ask our viewers to pay attention to is the number of donors.
Mhm.
that go into a specific campaign. You could have a candidate who might have 100 donations this last time. And then another candidate who might have 4, but that candidate might be raising, I don't know, $300,000 with those 4 donations, whereas this other one has raised 15,000
Right.
with quite a number of voters. So that's something that I've noticed that I've paid attention to when I go on your site.
Oh, look, if you have races that you're interested in, pulling up both candidates or
Mhm.
all however many candidates there are, it
Mhm.
is hugely enlightening to see
Yeah,
who's really supporting, what kind of donations are they accepting, and where the support's coming from. I mean,
right.
because there's a lot of times you'll have folks talk about certain things. This is
Mhm.
what I believe, whatever. But then you see who's supporting them and they say something very different. And that
Mhm.
tells you, look, once they get into office, they're going to be just like my rep was in HD
Right.
60 when they told me they were going to support public schools. And then they went to Austin and went to vote and they voted against it every time. It's because those
Right.
donors were telling them no.
Right. Exactly. So, yeah, you want someone that's going to represent the people, not the donors.
Mhm.
So that's what's important. Well, thanks so much, Chris. We appreciate you joining us and enlightening us on the most recent updates with redistricting and going back to the catalyst for what's going on now. We are always happy to have you on, and I hope you will always accept our invitation.
Absolutely.
Yay. All right. So make sure and check out See It, Name It, Fight It, folks. You're going to learn a lot of information there. And thank you, Chris.